Hi, I'm Julene, CEO of the International Academy of Astrology and Skywatch columnist for the Mountain Astrologer. Welcome to my Skywatch Observational Astrology Sky Tour for the weeks of January 1st through January 15th. The celestial events for the first half of January are going to include a first quarter moon, a full moon, and you'll be able to witness the moon's conjunction with Jupiter and Mars in the night sky. Now the Quadranid meteor shower also peaks during this time frame. It peaks on January 4th, so I'm going to show you where to find that. Okay, so here's Venus, and what I want to do is I want to track this through the first 2 weeks here so that you can watch Venus travel along the tail of Capricorn and into the constellation Aquarius. Now, Jupiter recently stationed direct. Okay, so Jupiter's moving very, very slow, and he's going to remain in relatively the same spot in the sky for these first 2 weeks because he's just moving a degree of that. Okay, so here's Jupiter. It's going to stay in about the same place. Venus is going to travel through here and move into Aquarius. So let's move this ahead to the 2nd. Okay, so now the evening of the 2nd, we're going to have, this is the first quarter moon occurs on the 1st, so this is going to be slightly larger than half-lit moon. Is going to be hanging out right above Jupiter on the evening of January 2nd. So you want to make sure you watch for that. Okay, now we're going to focus on Venus as I move this ahead each day. There's the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th. Okay, so Venus is covering a good bit of sky. Okay, now on January 1st, Venus is going to set around 7:30. Okay, Jupiter sets about 2 a.m. Then on January 15th, okay, Venus is going to stay visible until about 8:15. So that's a big difference from, setting around 7:30 p.m. on the 1st to being visible, till 8:15. Okay, so Jupiter sets around 1:15 a.m. on January 15th. So he starts out setting at 2 a.m. at the beginning of the month. Mid-month, he's setting at 1:15. Beginning of the month, Venus sets at 7:30. Mid-month, she sets at 8:15. Okay, so the next planet to watch happens when Mars comes up over here in Leo. So let's get this to where we have the zodiac there. Okay, here's 10:30. Okay, Mars is, oops, that's on the 15th. Let's go back to the 1st. Okay, January 1st, Mars rises around 11. Okay, just east of the tail of the Leo Denobula. So, and Mars is going to station retrograde in a couple weeks around January 23rd. So he's slowing down, and Mars is only going to cover about 3 degrees of the sky during these 2 weeks. Okay, so Mars is going to rise around 11 p.m. on January 1st, and then it's about 10:15 on January 15th. So let's move this to the 15th. See, he hasn't moved that much. He's just covering a very small bit of sky. And you'll see that this time there's 10:15 when Mars is rising. So back to the 1st, and the next planet to rise is going to be Saturn. Saturn rises, let's go back one, about 2 a.m. Okay, on January 1st. There is Saturn right there hanging out near Spica, Saturn in the constellation Virgo. And Saturn's going to station retrograde on February 7th, so he too is slowing down. Remember, during the last couple months, we were able to watch Saturn pass up Spica. Well, now Saturn's going to kind of hang out here. And when Saturn goes retrograde, Saturn is going to go backwards through here and pass Spica again. But for now, he's going to remain relatively still, sitting in the same degree of the sky for these 2 weeks. So we're not going to notice much of his movement. So here we are at 2 a.m. on January 1st, but on January 15th, you'll see that Saturn is actually, going to rise around 1:15. There we are. 1:15 on the 15th, Saturn rises. So let's track the moon with Jupiter and Saturn here through the night sky. We can get them all above the horizon here at this time. Here's January 1st. And then remember, on January 2nd, the moon was going to hang out, right here by Jupiter. And then it takes the moon a while. The moon moves 13 degrees and 20 minutes roughly every day, so it's going to take a moment to get through here. And on the 14th, Mars will be above the moon. On the 15th, the moon is going to be almost halfway between Mars and Saturn in the sky. Now, Mercury is going to be the next planet to rise. I'm going to go back to the first. We're going to take a look at the early morning sky. And we're going to see Mercury rising here. Oops, went too fast. On the 1st at about 6:30 a.m. Okay, so this is where things get interesting again because we have some movement to track. So Mercury rises 6:30 a.m. on January 1st in the constellation Scorpio near the place in the ecliptic plane where the foot of Ophiuchus touches down. Okay, now here's Mercury below and slightly left of Antares, which we just watched him pass up in the previous video blog that I did. And now he's going to move through Scorpio and into Sagittarius. So what I want to do is I want to bump this up a bit in time so that we can watch this movement happen. I'm going to 7:15. And I want to mention another thing here. I want to mention that just because the foot of Ophiuchus dips into the ecliptic does not mean that we are going to call him the 13th zodiac sign. You have to remember that zodiac signs are different than zodiac constellations. And it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the tropical zodiac signs or the sidereal zodiac signs, because even in the sidereal zodiac, not all constellations are 30 degrees in length. I mean, look how huge Virgo is, compared to Libra. Okay, so they're not all 30 degrees. Whether we're doing tropical or sidereal, the constellations are not all 30 degrees, so they don't completely match up in any zodiac at all. So where Ophiuchus's foot comes into the ecliptic, I kind of look at that like an encroachment, to borrow a real estate property boundary term. So like, let's say that your neighbor's garage, let's say the roof of that garage ran over your property line. It doesn't mean that you own their garage and you can park your car in there. So it's just like the foot of Ophiuchus is crouching onto the ecliptic plane, but that doesn't give him ownership of a zodiac sign. The rest of the constellation is well above the ecliptic. All right, so let's watch Mercury as he moves toward the tail of the Scorpion and into the constellation of Aquarius. Here's 7:15 on the morning of the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th. I'll move this up so you can see that this is Sagittarius here. And see how close Mercury is to the Sun now? So we're losing Mercury's visibility. Mercury is really getting too close to the sunrise, somewhere around, if not before, and it's probably going to, depend on the lights in your city and the layout of your horizon, your altitude and things. You're going to lose visibility of Mercury around or before the 15th. See, there's 7:30 and Mercury's very dim at that point and very close to the Sun. Sunrise is starting. So you may not notice Mercury at that point. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention is the quadrantid meteor shower. Okay, so the quadrantid meteor shower is active from December 28th through January 12th, okay, but it peaks on the morning of January 4th around 5:30 a.m. 5:30 a.m. on January 4th, we're going to be looking for the quaternids to peak over in this area just north of Bootes. Okay, this is where that shower is going to come into play. Now the quaternids are complements of Parrot Comet 2003 EH1. And they have an extremely variable rate. Okay, we could see anywhere from 25 to 200 meteors per hour during this time of the peak, which is from about 5:30 a.m. when the constellation is far enough above the horizon that it can peak. As long as this area of the sky is coming above the horizon, so for a few hours before that you might catch some. But the peak, the major activity, is going to be when it's very dark, and it's as high as it can be during the very darkness. So this is kind of curious, right? Why is this called the quaternids when it's kind of radiating here north of Bootes? Why isn't it the Boutids? And why isn't there a constellation here? We know that the meteor showers are named after the constellations they radiate from. So what's going on here? Well, first of all, it can't be the Boutids because the Boutids are a different meteor shower that actually occur in June, and they have a different parent comet, and they radiate more from within the boundaries of Bootes. Now the quaternids are named after a now defunct constellation that was called the Quadrans Muralis. And this is a constellation that was named after a medieval instrument for measuring the altitude of the stars. Okay, this constellation came into being by French astronomer Jerome Lalande in 1795. And in order to make the shape of this instrument of the Quadrans Muralis, he borrowed stars that belonged to Bootes, and some that belonged to Draco, and some that belonged to Ursa Major over here. And that's where that's coming from. So in 1922, the International Astronomical Union, the IAU, decided that the constellation maps were too crowded. Okay, they kind of wanted to clean up the sky, make more definite boundaries. So they got rid of the Quadrans Muralis and a few other constellations and gave us the official list of our 88 official constellations we know today. 48 of those were named by Ptolemy, by the way, in his Tetrabiblios. But here's a fun fact of synchronicity with the IAU and the Uranus cycle and changing the rules and changing the sky. So in 1922, they get rid of some constellations, Quadrans Muralis being one of them. However, the meteor shower retained its name. Now, 84 years later, which is a Uranus cycle, so Uranus is returning to that point it was at in 1922 when they cleaned up the sky maps. It was on August 24th, 2006, when Pluto was demoted and Ceres was promoted. So what's happening at the Uranus return of getting rid of these constellations is now we are reclassifying planets. We reclassified the boundaries of the constellations, and now we are reclassifying planets in 2006, a Uranus cycle later. Because the IAU realized that we were, the more planets that we discovered, it really brought to question, what is the definition of a planet, right? The rule for something to be a planet was that it had to orbit the sun. Okay, well that rule stays. But we had to make some new rules for all of these other things, that we were discovering out there, like Sedna and Eris and all of those. So the rules that the IAU came up with and passed and moved forth with on August 24th, 2006 were this. Number one, classification of a planet, number one, is that the planet must orbit the sun. Okay, that stays. That was always the rule. Number two, it must have enough gravity to make itself round. Okay, this is the rule that promoted Ceres. Ceres is an asteroid. She orbits out in the asteroid belt, which lies between Mars and Jupiter. And she is the largest asteroid, and she has enough mass and therefore enough gravity to be round. So this is what was looking to promote Ceres to planet status. If these were the only two rules, Pluto would still be a planet and Ceres would also be a planet. Well, they didn't want to make more planets. They actually wanted to make less planets. So rule number 3 is that the planet must reign supreme in its own orbit. This means that it must have cleared the neighborhood of all other planets, either by capturing it in its gravity as moons, or, so that it's the only thing orbiting around in its own neighborhood. Well, Ceres, of course, orbits with many other asteroids in the asteroid belt, so she does not reign supreme in the asteroid belt. So she has a dwarf planet status because she satisfies 2 of the rules. Same thing with Pluto. Okay, Pluto does not reign supreme in his orbit either. And there's something interesting that happens with Pluto and its moon Charon. It's not Chiron, okay? Chiron is C-H-I-R-O-N. This moon is Charon, C-H-A-R-O-N. And the moon Charon is roughly the same size as Pluto. And Pluto didn't capture its moon in its orbit. Okay, Pluto's moon does not orbit around Pluto. Pluto's moon never sets. Charon remains perpetually above Pluto's horizon. And the 2 being roughly the same size and mass with mutual gravitational pull on each other, the 2 planets orbit around each other in a similar way that binary stars behave in orbit with their counterpart. Okay, so this is a big portion of the rule that demoted Pluto to dwarf status. It didn't capture its moon. It's orbiting with its moon in a mutual attraction. So it didn't clear the neighborhood of its orbit. And plus, a lot of the Kuiper Belt objects are also considered to be in Pluto's neighborhood. So there's the interesting fun fact about the IAU and some of its reclassifications happening with the Uranus returns from each other. And I hope that this helps you to find the meteor shower. It's right out here. If you can find Boots, there you go. If you look at Saturn and go east, you'll see Hercules here. Go above to a point where there's not a whole lot of stars, because remember, this constellation was borrowing stars from all around. Okay, so it's right here, if that helps. There's Vega. Vega is another really pretty bright star, so if you go above Vega and left from Saturn, you'll be able to find the Boutids, and you'll be able to see them until sunrise. And sometimes you can see meteors after sunrise if they're bright enough to shine through, but you have the best luck when the shower is high above the horizon and the sky is dark. And that concludes my video blog for this time, and I hope you all have a very happy New Year.